Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Get in the Cashflow Game with K&K. And today, we have Chappell coming in. Travis I met at Avengers, my mastermind. I ran into them and then found out, like a lot of people just run and go, what do you do? And he teaches people how to start podcasts.
Not how to start, really how to start and grow
podcast. Okay, we'll start and then from there. And I actually had a really, really cool conversation. Oh, by the way, before we jump in, you guys, if you like this show, please share our show. Also, you should be giving us some amazing 5-star reviews. Anything else, Crystal?
Yeah, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with anybody you think that could benefit from the value that we give in these podcasts, and help us get people like The Rock or like Robert Kiyosaki on our show. We can only do that if we have millions and millions of downloads. So,
but the cool thing is,
yeah,
Travis, if you guys have a podcast, you should definitely listen to this because we got some hacks. We definitely did, and you can go deeper with hacks because I know. But super cool story. Just another story like all these, like a lot of people, like just kind of trying to figure out his way. I'm not going to give it away, but he has a crazy upbringing. If you think you're sheltered, I would imagine.
He has a very unique upbringing, one that you don't hear from a lot of people. So the fact that he was kind of able to break out of that mold, his world was very, very small. And then
very small.
Go out into the big, crazy world where lots of wild things are happening on a daily basis, and also just trying to make use of the way that you were brought up and the way that you were educated, even though that doesn't match with kind of like the way he was educated and brought up is just very, very different than the real world. It was incredibly sheltered. So, and then he also has done some like really crazy things, like hearing about his door-to-door sales. I mean, it's just insane. Like, I don't know anybody at our age really who did a lot of door-to-door sales. It's kind of an old school thing to do.
You just don't know that many people. There are a lot. You just don't know. And
they do it now. They do it now. They do it now, and it still works, I guess. But
you might have a solar guy knocking on your door, and you're like, they still do.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about Travis is, which I love when we interview people that are other podcasters, because you guys are listening to this, you might be like, it's great you do this, you might understand it, but podcasting is definitely a long game. And so if you're looking to get into a podcast for your business, you have to understand that this is a definite marathon, as Crystal probably agreed. This is not a sprint, so there's not an instant gratification. Look, you might start a podcast and you might be one of the few, like Jessie Lee. It's like doesn't even interview people and she's just boom, but she has an amazing following. But for most of us, this is a long haul, and it's day by day, year by year, but you're just building it up. And so Travis talks about that. We also talk about some way that some technology started, how to get in front of different guests faster to help your podcast. So he just really helps you if you want to start a podcast. This is what Crystal said, and also grow it faster. He's mastered that. And he actually has had some really amazing guests on, which I was like, man, I'm jealous. So I'm like, cool. I know I can connect with him a little bit more, and he gets help us get some bigger guests on. And honestly, everybody thinks to get a big guest on, you just have to have this massive following and all these subscribers. And he's going to tell you that's not the truth. So,
not necessarily the case. Yeah.
It does help, but also there are some tricks and hacks. And I don't know, Crystal, what else did you get away from this conversation?
Well, I think for me, if you're even thinking of starting a podcast, this is a great one to listen to, or if you're just interested about how podcasts work. But I mean, most of us are not making our living solely on podcasting. So he really helps people to monetize their shows as well. And so it just sort of depends on your goals. But it was really interesting to hear his kind of outlook on how you would make podcasting your, primary source of income, perhaps. So there are a lot of things in a lot of ways, and podcasts are not going away, they're only growing, but there are a lot of people. He needs some statistics of how many millions of podcasts are out there in the world.
2 million. I think there's like 450 to 750 that are active, and most people, I think 95% of people that start a podcast fail, and they only get to episode 10 or 11.
Right. So anyways, we do talk about all that in the show, and it's very interesting. So if you like listening to podcasts, if you want to start a podcast, this is a really cool episode to listen to. This guy knows a lot.
So let's jump in with Travis.
Awesome. Travis, for coming on the show today. I know you and Kenny met through the Avengers Mastermind, and it sounds like it's been a cool experience for you guys. I know I'm not part of it, but sounds like you guys have a lot of really cool people in the group, and we're excited to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we got to talking a little bit over there. Found out he had a podcast, and I was like, man, these are my people. So thanks for having me on.
You've got a cool setup there yourself.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You know, I finally upgraded after being the podcaster that didn't have any of this stuff. Like my first ever studio setup was literally in my closet. I put my MacBook Pro on a flipped upside down laundry basket, and I had my $50 Amazon USB mic plugged into my MacBook, and like that was my entire studio setup before. So we're moving up in the world.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, honestly, that have big podcasts are still doing that, which I think is just a tribute to the fact that almost anybody can start a podcast. I think a lot of people never do, or they don't keep up with it because it's work, obviously. But you don't need a lot of equipment to start a podcast.
No.
So
That's
great.
facts. Yeah.
So Travis, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what you're up to today.
Sure. So background, just kind of go 30,000 foot view here. Grew up in a small town in Southern California called Lancaster, in the Antelope Valley. And there's this massive church that's in Lancaster that is probably, I don't know now, maybe 6,000 to 8,000 members or something like that. And it's in this really small segment of Christianity, like a subsect of a subsect of Christianity as a whole. And the best way that I can describe it, it was like growing up in a bubble. So I don't necessarily refer to it as a cult, but it definitely has those tendencies and characteristics. And I say that I grew up in it because literally from the time I was 3, we started going to church there when I was 3. And then they have a K through 12 school on the campus, the same campus as the church. So I was enrolled in kindergarten at that school. I went all the way through to my senior year of high school, graduated. And then they also had a college on the same campus. It was a ministerial college. And so I went to the college that was on that campus. So quite literally from the time that I was 3 until the time that I was about 22 years old, basically the majority of my life was lived on this 140-acre campus, because it was also where I went to church, right? So like Monday through Friday, I had school. We had church Sunday morning, we had church Sunday night, and we had church on Wednesday night. And then we had soul winning on Saturdays, which is basically just like door-to-door sales for the church for free, where you just go out and knock on doors, invite people to come to church on Sunday. And so, almost every day of my life, and obviously I went on vacation and there was summertime and different things like that. But the majority of my life was lived on that campus growing up. And so it was a unique, way to grow up, especially in Southern California, right? Because like, it's just kind of a weird place to have this huge, like super strict fundamentalist group of Christians at that size and at that capacity. So that's where I where I grew up. And by the time I graduated college, I realized I didn't want to be in ministry, and at that point I just double majored in Bible and church ministries. And I don't know if you guys have ever tried to go get a job with a degree in Bible and church ministries.
Yeah.
There's not many people that are searching for those resumes on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? And what made it even worse is that the degree was unaccredited. So it was like an unaccredited Bible degree. And I basically just didn't know what to do from there. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, because I did it in college, which was door-to-door sales. And I did that for 5-6 years, basically got fed up with it, and looked into the future and saw that, when I was 33, 34, 35, I didn't want to be knocking on doors anymore. So no idea what to do. The only thing I had experience in, I didn't want to do door to door. And the only thing that I had a degree in, I also didn't want to do. And it didn't provide any other opportunities. So here I am. I'm like 23 years old. I'm married. I have a mortgage to pay. And I don't know what I want to do with my life. I felt like a 15-year-old in a 23-year-old's body, except for I had a bunch of responsibilities and bills to pay. So I, for the first time in my life, found personal development, because I honestly just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to find out what I was going to do. I was looking up FBI applications. I was looking at how to get in the fire department. Like I was looking at sales job after sales job after sales job. Couldn't find anything. Nobody would give me a job. And started listening to podcasts to figure out what I was going to do. And podcasts kind of became the thing that I was like, this seems like it'd be a really interesting way to make a living. And started the podcast, and rest is history.
Wow, that's crazy.
That is a very unique story,
Yeah, it was a very interesting way to grow up, and even more interesting way to navigate my 20s because you're
Yeah.
basically just reinventing who you are and who you were supposed to be. You know,
Basically kind of lived in another world for most of your life, it sounds like. It just out of curiosity, does your family still go to the same church? Are they still part of that?
yeah, not really. They probably haven't gone there in a couple of years. So yeah, as soon like whenever we graduated, they kind of just stopped going. Is when my sister and I stopped going.
Interesting.
So I know when we met at Ventures, you were talking about we got into podcasting. So what exactly are you doing with podcasting, and then what is your podcast about?
Yeah, sure. So, what we do in the podcast space is we help entrepreneurs build profitable podcasts. And so, we have a coaching program, we have a done for you production service, we have courses and membership sites, a community basically that just helps people build podcasts that can actually turn a profit. So, we take entrepreneurs and build shows for them, teach them how to use it as a business development tool. And then we'll take people who just want to podcast for a living and we try to teach them how to go get sponsors and get Patreon subscribers and make a living through podcasting. And then my podcast is called Build Your Network and is all about how to build high level relationships with people that push you to become a better version of yourself.
Very cool.
That's cool. So it's kind of funny. Can you give us like, because I know there's statistics on podcasts, right? And the numbers are kind of crazy. You probably know them. So people that, because people throw them out to us. So statistics, how many people like start podcasts, follow through podcasts, that kind of stuff. Do you have those statistics? I was just curious if you knew what they were.
Yeah, so there are currently a little bit over 2 million podcasts in existence, and less than 750,000 of those are currently active. So 60 something percent off the top of my head, 70% of people give up on their podcast. I heard that it was like 90% of those do that with before they hit episode 11 was the last stat that I heard. I don't know the source of that and I can't 100% guarantee that one, but it's a large percentage of people that give up before they even hit, uh, 10 episodes. So yeah, the attrition is pretty high.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's little to no chance of virality and discoverability on the platform itself. So people get super encouraged with YouTube channels or TikTok or something like that because anybody can go on that platform and get lucky, create a video that gets shown to a bunch of people on the platform. The algorithm takes it off, and then all of a sudden you got a YouTube video that got 150,000 views and brought you in 3,000 subscribers to your channel. You know what I mean? That just happened to me on TikTok last week. We don't do anything on TikTok, and my producer all of a sudden was like, "We need to do more on TikTok." And I was like, "Whatever, bro, do your thing." And he put an interview clip up on TikTok and it has almost 300,000 views. And it took me from like 40 followers to 600 followers in less than a week. So those types of things get people excited about the platforms and get people hopeful that one of their things is going to hit. With podcasting, it doesn't work that way. With podcasting, it's definitely not the if you build it, they will come type of a thing. It's if you build it and then market the shit out of it, then they might potentially come. You know what I mean? So it's just a much more difficult platform to gain traction on. So I think it just is really discouraging for people, especially with how much work they put into it. And so they just give up on it.
Yeah, it seems like people have asked us a lot of times, especially in real estate, because I feel like at least Kenny doing residential, there's many more people who are good with social than commercial, which is what I do. But everybody asks us, hey, are you guys really getting any results with your podcast? And look, we don't have hundreds of thousands of followers and we don't have any viral videos or anything like that. But what I can say is that the podcast has been great. Like if somebody wants to maybe is considering working with us and then they find out we have a podcast, they listen to a couple episodes and they Google our names and a bunch of YouTube videos pop up and then we have like, reviews and things like that. They go, oh wow, these people must really know what they're talking about. So I think the podcast has really helped to kind of give that sense of authority. But it's work, right? Like you have to be consistent with it. That's our biggest thing is you have to do it. Something that we do weekly. We put out an episode every week. I think we missed for like a month over the holiday, like maybe.
Sometimes we take a break, yeah.
Yeah, but 120 plus episodes in, we've been pretty Maybe you won't get famous at all. Who knows? But we do it because we enjoy it. And also, it does, like, it's maybe not the thing that gets us a lot of business or makes us a lot of money, but it's the thing that helps to solidify, somebody who wasn't a referral, like a cold lead coming in goes, oh, wow, I feel like I know you guys. I listened to a few of your podcast episodes, watched a couple of your videos. I want to work with you.
Exactly. That's for businesses, for entrepreneurs. That's the biggest thing that I tell people is like your podcast becomes your number one business development rep. Like it's constantly working for you in the background. And it's constantly, my thing is that it's constantly getting your foot in the door with people who may not have normally given you any of their time. You know what I mean? Like I literally had somebody tell me that. This is when one of my big aha moments when I was first starting my podcast. I reached out to there was two people in particular that I remember. One of them was a guy named Ivan Meisner. He's the founder and chief visionary officer of Business Networking International. So when I started my show, Build Your Network, I was like, hey, this guy, like CNN called him the father of modern networking. Seems like a person I should probably connect with. And I connect with him on email or something. I forget how I got in touch with him, but I reached out and I finally, got a hold of him, and I was like, hey man, I just want 3 minutes of your time on a quick phone call. I have a question for you. And he said, no, I don't do that. I have consulting clients that pay me for that type of stuff. So I don't do that. He's like, but if you just shoot it over in an email, I'll do my best to answer it. So I asked a quick networking question or something. And then he got back to me with it. And I mentioned something about my podcast in my reply to him. And he offered and goes, oh, I see you have a podcast about networking. I'm happy to jump on and talk about it for a little bit on that if you want to. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're going to say no to a 3-minute phone call that nobody even has to know existed. Like nobody even has to know that we connected and talked on a phone call, right? But you're going to say no to that. And you're going to say yes to a 45-minute podcast interview where I get to pick your brain and ask as many questions as I want to about this thing that I'm trying to learn about from experts like you. And you're going to let me share that episode to my audience that makes me look more badass and more credible because I just shared the stage with somebody of your stature, and helps them learn at an exponential rate because I just gave them access to somebody that's difficult to get access to. Like, wow, you're going to do that? That's crazy. And then it happened again with another guy who's actually in the Avengers group and the 100 Million group. And it was one of the first people I started following in the online space. And it was Ryan Stewman. When I was in door-to-door sales, he had the hardcore closer sales blog, and I
Yeah.
was like reading the stuff, right? So when I started a podcast, he was one of the people I reached out to. He said the same thing. I asked him for 3 minutes of his time. He said no. I have mastermind clients that pay me 35K a year to get that kind of access to me. It wouldn't be fair to them. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I think he even just saw my podcast name in like my email signature or something like that. And he goes, but I'll come on your podcast. And I was like, whoa, this is two of like the first 10 high level people that I reached out to that said no to this. Like, I thought it was a lighter ask. I thought it was an easier ask to be like, hey, 3 minutes of your time. I just have a quick question, you know? And both of them turned that down and said yes to the podcast interview. And it was just like light bulb, for me. It was just like, wow, people, are eager to share their messages via content that they can use for personal branding purposes rather than just like jumping on a phone call and giving free advice.
100%. I think it's great because, I mean, obviously that becomes the thing, right? Is getting on other people's podcasts. And then it's just like that. Like, they get access to your community too, who's probably going to start following. But you're right. We kind of learned that too during COVID. It was, we were kind of like, hey, now there's this whole network of people who don't even normally do podcast interviews that we can go reach out to because now they're all on Zoom. They can do it from the comfort of their home, and they don't have to drive anywhere. We don't have to fly anywhere, and you can get like some of these bigger names on your show. So it's been good for us too in learning and getting people access to someone they would never have been able to get in touch with before.
Yep. Yep, 100%. And that's why when we work with entrepreneurs, that's the biggest thing we help them with. Like, we're not even, most of the time we're not even talking about audience growth. We're not even talking about those things. It's just like, hey, make a list of all of the people that you want to be doing business with, your top referral partners, your top potential business partners, your top, potential clients. Make a list of all those people, segment those lists, and start reaching out to all of them to get them as guests on your show. And then if you could do something like what you guys have built there, which is like a legit looking studio with professional audio quality, professional visuals that are all set up. When they jump on the call, you look like the badass that you are. You know what I mean? And you now have an opportunity to get your foot in the door with this person that could potentially be a huge partner for you. And so what we're doing this year is we're trying to take that a step further. And so tomorrow is our first ever Build Your Network guest dinner that we're putting on. And we invited out a bunch of our past guests that have been on the show that we'd like to, generate a further connection with. The cost is on me. I'm eating the cost for the event, putting on a dinner, bringing out 25 to 30 people who've been a guest on my show in the past that are all really high quality people, and putting them in a room together and letting them get to know with each other and connect with each other, and then hear a little bit more about the things that I'm up to and see if there's any room for potential synergy or introductions or partnerships or anything that could come out of it. And so we've really used it as like a huge business development and relationship building opportunity.
That's so smart. It sounds like it's kind of its own mini mastermind, really. And I know that word is kind of like a thing now, but it's so true because I think the biggest thing that I learned from Kenny is being part of the Avengers group was the kind of, it's not even just networking, but like it's business people helping each other with their problems and issues. And that is invaluable. I mean, if you can go back and now implement this in your business, or now you have a new connection for this problem that you were trying to solve, that's awesome that you're doing that. I have a question for you. So, what would you tell somebody? Because I've heard, from the numbers too, like how many people actually make a living doing podcasting is pretty low. So, what do you tell people that want to make a living at podcasting? Like, what kind of steps do they need to be prepared to take, and how long do they need to be prepared to have to wait or build their podcast before it becomes something that's actually profitable?
Sure. So it depends for everybody. But overall, what my initial advice always is figure out what your goal is. Like, how long of a runway do you have before you absolutely have to make money on this show? Right. So, like, if you're somebody that's just like, man, I hate my job, I don't want to do it anymore. I want to do this podcasting thing and I want to figure it out. Okay, cool. The path to revenue for you is going to be a little bit different. Like, you're probably going to have to start a business on the back end of your podcast, whether you're selling your knowledge as a coach or consultant or course creator or something like that, or you're selling a service on the back end of it, like being a social media manager or being a podcast producer or something like that. You're going to have to sell something if you want to make money on it immediately. And then the way that you generate business for that is you create your offer, and then you go interview your ideal prospects and try to sell some of those people into your offer. And then that allows you to build up some capital to be able to start reinvesting back into growing the show and building up your sponsorship income. If you are somebody that's like, I have no interest in doing that, then for you, the path is going to be a long path. Like, just making money off of sponsorships and Patreon enough to where you can actually make a living doing it, you're going to need 100 to 200,000 downloads a month on your podcast. And for context, I think only 5% of podcasts have those types of numbers. Maybe 3% of podcasts have those types of numbers. It's a really, really small amount. And it takes a lot of consistent effort over a long period of time to get there. And so that's why I always ask people that question of like, what's your runway? Like, how long before you give up on this, or how long before freaking shoot yourself because you hate your job that much. You know what I mean? Like, what's the runway? What's the runway we're working with? What does that look like? Because it's going to be different for everybody. Like, some people are just like, no, I really like my job. I actually love doing what I do. I just like want a little bit more freedom in my life, and long term, I want a career that allows me to spend more time with my family. So, I'd like to do this. Okay, great, that's awesome. Because that person we can sit down with and be like, okay, let's build a 5-year plan. You know what I mean? To where, like, you don't have to worry about products or services or this or that. You build your audience and you serve that audience and you deliver content to them. And if you get lucky, you can get it done in 6 months. But if you don't get lucky, 5 years is still a good time frame to be working on this type of a thing. But if you can tolerate your job, or you really enjoy what you do, and it gives you a little bit of extra money to spend on a side hustle that helps you market and get more listeners and do better projects and create better content, or focus on the tasks that are priority tasks in that business, then let's do it that way. So I know that's kind of a vague answer, but it's difficult to say kind of like a blanket statement, because everybody's got different goals for what success is to them. For some people it'd be like, hey, if I made $3,000 a month off my podcast, I would do it full time. I have 3 roommates. It doesn't bother me. Like, that's totally cool. Or, and some people might look at $2,500 and be like, yeah, that's not even my mortgage, bro. So
Yeah.
like, I don't need to make like 15K, you know? So it just kind of depends for different people, different strokes for different folks. You know what I mean? So depends on how much runway you have and how fast you have to absolutely make money off of this is going to determine the monetization angle that you're going to approach it from.
And so it sounds like you help people who maybe even don't have a podcast, just want to start a podcast. Because I know a lot of the, it seems like a lot of the podcast kind of managers or companies that host podcasts uh, have like a minimum requirement of how many downloads you have to have in order for them to even take you on. So are you helping people get off the ground running?
Yep. Yeah, we help in kind of every step of the journey with different things that we have. So, like the main thing that we try to push people to now is our $97 a month membership site. Because you get weekly Zoom calls and Q&As. We have trainings in there. We do a bunch of stuff like that to help people that are like just getting started get their thing off the ground. All right. So we have like a launch course. It's $99. It's 30 days. By the end of 30 days, you will have a podcast launch. We'll even ship you a microphone for free to help you along in your journey. And then from there, we try to get people to the mastermind, help them start cultivating their ideas a little bit more, making their content a little bit better, deciding what the future of their show looks like. And then if you want to get there faster and want more specific help, then we have more of our higher level, high ticket coaching that gets like somebody on my team to actually work with you on a weekly basis, one on one, to help you reach your goals in your podcast. And we even have done for you production. We do it very seldomly. We don't like to do a lot of them, so it's very particular clients that we work with for that. And that's more, really higher ticket prices because we're doing all the production work and all the actual like, physical workload that comes along with it. But it makes it to where, some entrepreneurs are just busy. They don't have a ton of time to worry about how to submit their podcast to iTunes. And so we'll just take on all that work as well. So we kind of help at every part of the process, whether you're just getting started and you just want to create a hobby podcast, or you've got a $5 million a year business and you want to build your personal brand. Like, whatever your goals are, we're going to tailor that to what your goals are and then put you in the correct program for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's kind of funny. I don't remember when I talked to you, so you'll find this kind of interesting. So we didn't do any marketing or anything, right? And I think a lot of people I think a lot of people right now that aren't doing marketing, they're seeing people do the podcast, see people do social and stuff. I think it's almost overwhelming where to start, right? And that's why it's like you have a coaching. That's why I tell people you got to go get a coach. Then that's why it's there. They can really plug you in. So I mean, I just went to Gary V's 4D dive, and I'm sitting in a room, and he comes in and he's like, "Tell me your story." And this is my real okay. So what are you doing here? I don't really know. What do you mean you don't know? I'm like, I'm just here to learn about the social media stuff because I don't really do it. He's like, okay. So what do I do? He's like, well, I mean, what I would advise is just go back to San Diego and get in front of a camera and tell everything you know about real estate to everybody. I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, just go fucking do it. Like, Gary, I was like, okay. So I come back and Chris like, what did he say this? He goes, what's that mean? I go, I don't know. So we came back here and it's like, like I'm telling people who are watching this for you, it's like, we just bought, the guy there had a podcast. So we said, what's the equipment? Bought the equipment and we started having people on. So I think for us, it was like, just get started, just get in the game, just go. Right. I think so many people overthink it. And so I was going to ask you, like, are a lot of people that are coming to you? I mean, are they just like so many people? I feel like just overthink this. It's like, just get the mics, get the setup, and start interviewing people. And trust me, our first interview to now, it's terrible, but who cares? You got to start somewhere.
Yep. Got to start somewhere, man. We have people who paid us thousands of dollars to do production work for them, and they've never sent us an episode. Like, it's been like a year and a half. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like that. You're still planning this, man. Like, record one fucking episode and send it to us. Like, we want to help you. You know what I mean? You paid us to help you. Let us help you. But I can't record the episode for you. You know what I mean? Like, you're the personality here. Like, you still got to do a little bit of work. Like, put something on the recorder and send it our way, man. Like, it's better. I tell people all the time, better done than perfect. Get it out there. Like, in fact, you can almost guarantee that you're going to suck. because you've never done this before. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, I don't know why people have this like misconception that they're just going to be amazing at this when they first get started. Like, the people that are over planning are doing it to protect their own ego because they don't want to put something out into the world that's not perfect. And it's like, you're most likely going to suck.
And guess what? You're most likely going to have like 5 people, most of which are your family members or your
Yeah.
like, wife, like husband, whatever, listening to it.
Right.
Nobody's really going to listen to you. So that's the other thing. That was kind of what comforted me, because I think a lot of people want, like you said, you want it to be perfect, and nobody likes the sound of their own voice, and nobody likes the way that they look on camera. So you keep doing this and you're like, I don't like it. It's not enough. But I would literally be like, who the hell am I kidding? Nobody's even gonna listen to us. Like, just put the damn thing out there and then, keep going. So that was
Exactly.
helpful to me just to get over it. But I think that's like a big hurdle for a lot of people. Like you said, they spend the money and they do all the things to get to that point, but they still can't pull the trigger and just record it.
Yep. Yep. No,
So,
100%.
so I got some questions from you. So, from one podcaster to somebody that trains people how to podcast, this is awesome. So I can pick your brain. So we did this really like, so my goal was, let's do the podcast for a year, like just do it for a year. So we started getting people and just see how it goes. 6 months in, we're getting traction. And then right about 6 months, we started noticing like, oh, I saw your podcast. And you just start seeing people start paying attention. Cause I think what happens is when you start something, people go, oh, let's see if they do it. Then they go, oh, wow, they're consistent. Then it's like, wow, they're really getting some guests. And it's like, holy smokes, they're really doing this. And I don't think people understand it's this whole process. And then after you've been doing it, we have this number of 100 episodes, people start taking you seriously. And then when you say, hey, you want to come on the show? Well, what's this? Oh, you had 100 episodes? Oh, okay. Wow. You guys have really, I think for some guests, like, you stuck it out. You did it. Like, I'll come on. And so, my question for you is, you mentioned a couple things like, finding guests and then marketing. So I'd ask you, even for us, is we have a list of guests we'd like to come on. Any recommendation, tips, tricks, hacks to get guests on that maybe you're emailing them, not getting attention, how you email them, anything like that? That's the first question I have.
Yeah, sure. So guesting kind of became the thing that we started doing a lot of training on, because people were asking me how I was able to book the people that I was booking, even though I was totally green to the industry. And we actually built a software to do this exact thing, which is the main thing that I do now is I'm the founder of this software company called Guestio. And so, if you got a little bit of money to spend and you got a list of guests that you want to bring on your show, I would check out Guestio first and see if any of those guests are listed as a bookable guest on Guestio, because it's kind of like Cameo, but it's for podcast interviews. So you can go on there and search for a Jordan Harbinger who gets 11 million downloads a month on his podcast. You can go book him directly on Guestio right now if you pay what his price is to be a guest. You know what I mean? So we got a bunch of people on there. So that'd be the first thing that I would say. That's the hack, right?
I like
Because
that. I like that. I
if you
like that.
pay them, there's coming on. You know what I'm saying? It takes all the guesswork out of it. You don't have to go through a bunch of gatekeepers and social media and whatever else. So that's the first thing. The other advice is a lot more difficult because it takes a lot longer, and you just have to be okay with people not returning your calls or your messages. So the number one way that I was able to get some of the higher level folks on my show was taking out the guesswork for them when I reached out to them. You have to think that anytime you reach out to a busy person, somebody that's strapped for time, and you guys know this because you are also some like people that are strapped for time, right? You're running a big business, you have a podcast, you have too many things to do and not enough time to get them done in. And so when people reach out to you, they gave you homework. When
Yeah.
you reach out to somebody that doesn't know you, you gave them a piece of homework, because now they have to go be like, okay, is Crystal and Kenny's show, is this something that we should go on? Is this something that we should take our time to do? And then they got to go research you and see, okay, have they had anybody on that we know? How many downloads do they get? And then that's when you get these emails back from their team. That's basically those questions. Well, tell us how many downloads you have, and we'll think about it, basically. So what I started doing was trying to make sure that they had all the information that they needed in order to be able to make a decision in the reach out message itself. without having to do any further research or additional questioning or anything like that. And the way that I knew how to do that best was through the credibility of bringing on high level guests that were in that person's network and then naming those people by name specifically in the reach out message. So when I got Grant Cardone on my show, the first time that I reached out to him, I didn't have any really big name guests, nobody that he would have recognized, and I was completely ignored. Nobody got back to me. They didn't even hint at the fact that they read it. I didn't know. It just was completely ignored. 7 months later, I reached out again. Very similar reach out, same exact platform that I reached out on the first time. It was Instagram DMs. And the second time that I reached out, I listed about 11 other people that I knew that he already knew, liked, trusted, or had done business with that I had on my show at that point, because I went in and kind of infiltrated his circle of friends and people. And so when I reached out the second time, I was like, hey, I've already had on Ed Milet. I already had on Brad Lea. I already had on, I listed literally 8, 9, 10, 11 people. And then the last one I put on was his own wife, Elena, who I also had already had on. And so now I had this entire list of people that I was like, hey, man, all these other people have already been on the show. When are you going to come on, type of a thing? And at that point, it answers the one question that busy people care about the most. And that one question has nothing to do with your downloads. It has nothing to do with your reviews or ratings or any of those things. The one question that people have is, are you going to waste my time? That's it. Now, if you have a bunch of downloads, that's answers that question, right? So I'm not saying they have zero correlation, but I'm saying that you don't have to have a ton of downloads to be able to book those types of guests, because they're not necessarily worried about it. They're just worried about, is this host a professional host who's going to do their research, ask good questions, and make this a profitable use of my time that we can distribute for other content on other channels that we have. Like, that's really the core question that they have in their mind. Even if they don't even think that's the question, that's still the question. You know what I mean? So I just try to make it as easy as possible for them. So like, he didn't have to do any additional research on me. He didn't have to go look up my podcast on iTunes. He didn't have to send his executive assistant to block me in the path before I got to him, because he answered the question of if I was going to waste his time by putting all the people who had given me their time, right? Like, Ed Milet doesn't waste his time either. So if this show is good enough for Ed Milet, if this show is good enough for Lori Harder, if this show is good enough for Carrie Kasem, for Elena Cardone, for Brad Lea, for all these other people that I already know, like, and trust and done business with, if this show is good enough for all of them, it's probably good enough for me. Sure, I'll go on. You know what I mean? And so it just it just started becoming kind of this game of how do I make sure that this person has all the questions that they need answered in order to come on my show? How do I make sure they have all the information the time that I reach out to them? Because if they have to go back to their computer and Google something and do more research, it's probably not going to happen.
That's really smart.
That's a really, really good answer. That was awesome. No, that was like, honestly, like, really detailed. So my next question is I'm kind of on to something here with you, I think, is you said you got to market the shit out of your show, the crap out of your show, whatever. So one thing I'm gathering is what you just said is that I have a software where you can pay people to come on your show, which technically, if you're paying somebody that has a large audience, that's almost like paying for marketing, because, especially if you do good snippets and clips and all this, they might throw up on social, whatever. So what is your recommendation for marketing your podcast?
Yeah. So on that, inside of Guestio, we thought about that from the podcaster perspective, from the show host perspective, because it's not just for podcasters, it's all content creators, bloggers, YouTubers, TikTokers, whatever. If you want to interview people for your content, regardless of where it lives, then you can go to Guestio and book people for it. And so we actually built in marketing upsells on the back end of the platform. So if you go on and let's say you book somebody like a John Lee Dumas, who gets, over 1 million downloads a month on his podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, you book him as a guest for your show. After the recording's done, you can pay him to market the show on his social channels. And so now you interviewed that person, and that person is marketing your interview with them to their audience of people, which is going to help you grow your audience more. Which we also, Jordan Harbinger has some of those marketing upsells on there. We have quite a few people that are taking advantage of those marketing upsells and selling like an Instagram swipe up and selling an Instagram static feed post and a tweet and or a podcast ad read on their podcast that gets millions of listeners, so there's that. And I'll say that, getting good guests is a way to market, but you still have to market that interview with that guest. And so that's one way to do it, is just pay them for the marketing as well. If you're like, I get frustrated with people when they're like, oh, I would never pay for something like that. It's like, why? Like, that person has worked their ass off to build
Yeah.
this asset that's an audience. And if you're if you're wanting them to give you free traffic, you like, that doesn't make any, like, it doesn't make any sense. You should be willing to pay for that. Like, they built it, like, they should be able to get money for in exchange, so you can pay to market directly on there. The other ways is however you can get in front of podcast listeners. So, it's difficult to do on Google ads or Facebook ads or any of these other types of ad platforms, because podcast listeners it's kind of like an island, like TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all that content is shareable and marketable on all of those platforms. It's interchangeable. Podcasting content is a different form of content creation. And so it kind of lives on its own little island, by itself in isolation, which is why it's so difficult to grow your show there. So you have to figure out, how do I get in front of podcast listeners? And the best way that I know how to get in front of podcast listeners is doing exactly what we're doing right now. Is that anybody that's listening to this episode on Getting the Cashflow Game that didn't know who Travis Chappell was before now knows who Travis Chappell is, and can go search in the same podcast app they're listening to this in for Build Your Network and subscribe to the show if they like what they hear. So the best way that I know how to market a podcast is by becoming a guest on other podcasts within your space, or paying for ad spots on other podcasts within your space. That's the best way that I know how to grow a show.
I agree with that. I mean, I think too, a lot of us have just kind of started organically to, like we said, we were like, I don't need to be the next Joe Rogan. I don't think that that's realistic for us either. So we just want like the people that we know, and we want our own clients maybe listen to our podcast. So we've had even just like small wins where it was like somehow a light bulb went off, and I was like, why are we not marketing our podcast in my email signature, for God's sake? Like, just throw a banner up there. People started finding out about the podcast like that, just everyday people. And then word of mouth happens. And then you put it, on your stories, and you post it on your Facebook page. Like, it's for us, we've kind of decided it's the long game. Like, I don't need to make a living off my podcast, but I just wanted to help me grow my business and get the word out there, and then share information with people and become an authority in our own space. And then the next thing is, how the heck do we get on other people's podcasts? Because then we can tap into their audiences as well, which is like a whole new hurdle to get into. But it's definitely not just about recording the podcast and then putting it out there in the universe. It takes a lot more than that.
Exactly. Yes, it does. And that's the cool thing about it, though, is like the way you guys are doing it is awesome. Like how long you been podcasting now?
Little, like 2.5 years, maybe a little over 2.
Okay.
2, about 2. Yeah.
So like the cool thing to me about podcasting, because it's such a long-term play, is your podcast audience, your listener base. Like, if you do a good job cultivating a community there, that's going to last far beyond this business that you're in. You know what I mean? Like, you could exit this business, sell it in 4 or 5 years from now, and be 7 or 8 years in on a podcast, and all of a sudden you have 500,000 downloads a month. Like, that follows you into whatever you want to do next. Especially like when you're in a niche like the one that you're in. You know what I mean? Like, now it's like, hey, we got 500,000 people listen to our show every month. Why don't we create a software that serves this specific clientele? And then you have an entire audience of people that are down to try out whatever you want to do in the like, it's the best way to future proof your income, is to build in the distribution before you even have the business idea. You can even just send out surveys to your audience and be like, hey, what do you guys want to see from us? What are the biggest problems that you're facing right now in your mortgage business, in your escrow process, in your real estate marketing? Like, what are the biggest issues that you're facing? Oh, cool. We had 3,000 responses to this survey that we put out, and 65% of them said that they're facing this problem. Let's solve this problem with a product or a service or a software or whatever it is, and give it back to them. You know what I mean? It's the easiest way to build a business moving forward, because you already have the distribution built in, which is like half the battle in any business model. Is, how are you going to get this into the hands of customers? And it's like, well, I already have a list of customers, so they were just waiting for us to create it. You know what I mean? Like, how much easier of a sell is that?
For sure. Yeah. I think that's such a huge thing that you just mentioned, is the opportunities that you get from just building this community and being consistent with it. It takes you to places that you didn't even know that you could go just by virtue of meeting people, talking to people, and just kind of going through the process. It's kind of like one of the things I always say to Kenny is, okay, we're going to go down the road with this crazy, wild idea, like starting a podcast. And maybe it's not going to be for us. I don't know. Maybe it'll be great, and maybe it'll fizzle out and we'll decide not to do it. But either way, you get presented with other opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise had
Yep.
if you hadn't have taken the leap or made the decision or just followed through.
I mean, it's like a perfect
100%.
example. Like, it's the mastermind. Everybody's like, you're going through a mastermind. Well, you don't need a mastermind. But what do you mean I don't need a mastermind? I've never done a mastermind ever. I said, people are like, well, it's like, I'm like, I walk in a room, there's whatever, 100 people. And what I realized quickly, I'm like, everybody's like the same like-minded individuals here. Like we're all in the same wavelength. So it's not like somebody paid $5 to get here, somebody paid, we have a significant entry level, right? Your entry level's more, but these people are there to get something, but they're also good human beings. They want to give back. And look, by you coming on this podcast, Crystal's like, oh my God, this guy Travis I know. I'm like, I know he's doing some crazy things. He's there, he's spending money. He's not going to go spend the kind of money he is to go network with people if he's like, kicking tires around doing nothing. You're not going to do that. But then basically you come in here and I'm like, we're just like going to have a conversation, but now we're getting educated on podcasts. And our first year of podcasting, we honestly, like, I'm the worst. I'm like, oh, who cares about the numbers? Just keep doing it over and over and we'll figure it out next year or two. So for us, it's like, I feel like we've been doing it, but we're learning more and more now. We're learning, like, from here, we're going to have like, wow, there's a lot of stuff we can do to like take it to the next level. So I think people forget it's like podcasts and marketing. It's like, they just think they're going to like jump in and nail this thing right away. It might take 2-3 years just to get, oh my gosh, like to really get the concept and understand what you're really doing, not just with the guests, with how to get them, but marketing and this. It's like, so it's cool to come on and just, that's what I said is if I didn't have a podcast, even though you're part of Avengers, I would have probably never had this conversation with you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, because there wouldn't be a reason to follow up. You know what I mean? Like, we don't necessarily have like a ton of synergy in what we do for a living. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, there wouldn't be a crazy good reason for us to like hop on a call for an hour and just like waste time, but it's like, hey, if we're doing a podcast, then at that point it's like, oh, we're doing something here. We're doing something productive that's good for both of us, having a fun conversation along the way and learning from each other in the whole process. Like, that's the problem. That's the bottom line to me is people that don't start podcasts are people that are only getting into podcasts for the audience, and neglecting all of the other amazing reasons to have a show.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I really love what I love about it the best is just the conversations. Like just this right now, it's like when I see, it's cool because I see you in Dallas. It's like another further connection, but I'm like, cool. We're gonna dive in deeper probably on this stuff because we'll be together
Right.
for 3 days. So I'm like, hey, we'll have some side conversations. So, but it's just a conversation I get to have with you. I didn't know your whole beginning, the intro. I don't know that about you. Now I know. A lot of other people might not know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he has a crazy story. So I think that's awesome. I heard a statistic, and I don't know where I heard it. It was recently. I was going to ask you about this. Somebody said the interesting thing about podcast audience too is that they're not as true, more educated, different type of clientele. So the person that's listening is not going to watch Netflix. They're interested in growth or learning. But they also said, I think 60% or something of the people that listen to podcasts make 6 figures plus.
Yeah, I don't know the stat on the percentage that make 6 figures, but I do know that people who listen to podcasts are generally more educated, a higher level of education completed, and are higher income earners in like median household income by a significant amount. I don't know, like I said, I don't know the exact number, but there's some real data to back that up. Where podcast listeners are generally more like they're just better, especially if you're in business. They're going to be better customers for your business if that's the type of demographic that you're trying to reach. And they don't necessarily spend all day on social media. They're doing stuff. And the cool thing about podcasting is you can consume it while you're doing stuff. While you're driving to the office, or while you're working out at the gym, or while you're doing dishes or watching the kids. You can always have a podcast on in the background, which is kind of one of the cool things about it. 80% of podcast listeners listen to all or most of an episode after they hit play. Which, if you compare that to all the other forms of content creation, there's no other platform that can compete with podcasting in terms of audience engagement and activated listeners. You know what I mean? None of them come close.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree because I listen to podcasts doing almost anything. Like there's rarely a time where I'm just sitting and listening to a podcast and not doing anything else. It's usually while I'm
Yeah.
doing something. I throw it on 1.5 or 1.75 and do
Yep.
whatever it is that I need to get done. And it's cool because it feels like you're not, that you're learning something while you're doing this other task, whether it's dishes or putting makeup on in the morning or driving or whatever it is.
And
Question for you. I feel like I'm noticing too, like the podcast space evolving a little bit or just changing from what I've been used to seeing. Like, for example, a guy that Kenny listens to a lot is now they're kind of making it's a little bit more like a news show. Like maybe they talk about some current news thing and then they discuss it. Or there's other people who literally have their own podcasts and they rarely, if ever, have guests on. It's just a solo podcast. Have you seen certain things work better um, in the podcast space than others? And like, what are those things?
yeah, I don't think that there's like one specific style of show that outperforms everything else in those types of metrics that we're talking about. But from my perspective, I try to convince every single person that we touch in whether it's in our memberships or coaching programs or just our free Facebook group or whatever. I try to encourage everybody to do interview shows because I think literally 50% of the reason, if not more, to have a podcast is for the networking opportunity and for the business development and the relationships. And I think that if you neglect that, it's going to be a slower path to growth, a slower path to audience building, a slower path to building more relationships for yourself personally. I just I don't see a lot of reasons, especially unless you already have an existing audience somewhere. I don't see a lot of reasons to have a solo show by yourself where it's only you talking all the time. I just don't. I think that you're going to have a really difficult time marketing the show, really difficult time growing the show. You don't get the benefit of building relationships or doing business development or leveraging other people's audiences because they're going to share your content. Like you're really limiting yourself in a lot of ways if you do just a solo show by yourself talking about the thing that you know about. I think that everybody should be doing at least one interview a week if you're going to start a show.
Smart. Yeah. I wanted to switch gears here and ask you about the mastermind group, especially the 100 million and Avengers. I always like to know, are those the only ones you've done? And, what was the reason for you joining?
So the first ever mastermind I joined was from John Lee Dumas, who is a mentor of mine in the podcasting space, still is. He's actually an investor and partner in my software company as well now.
Nice.
And he's got over 100 million downloads on his podcast. I think he's got he's made 20-25 million off of it in the last 7 or 8 years directly from his show. Like he's just kind of one of the OGs in the space. And so the first time I ever paid for a mastermind was to go to his house in Puerto Rico for 3 days when at the beginning of my podcasting journey. And that one experience really just changed the trajectory of my life and my career and made me realize that it was possible to get access to these types of people. Because the way that I grew up, when I left that space and decided to not be in ministry, I was starting my network from scratch. Quite literally. I didn't know anybody outside of the world that I grew up in, especially not anybody that was successful in business or doing any big things in life or their careers. And so, I almost had to pay to get access for the first time to start cultivating those connections. And so that first mastermind really changed my life. And so after that, I started like actively looking for masterminds. I ended up joining another one from a guy named Cole Hatter with
Yeah.
an event called Thrive. And joined his mastermind and then joined his mastermind again. And then was kind of on the search for another one. And then met Joel Marion through a podcast interview, funny enough. And he freaking sold me. So I ended up joining the 100 million group as a way to really force myself to level up on a couple of things that I had just been kind of dragging my feet on. And I knew, at the time, $100,000 for a mastermind was like a huge deal for me. And really, I mean, is a huge deal for just about anybody at any point. To spend that much on a mastermind group is
A lot of
pretty
money.
big investment. Yeah. So, and like I said, for me at the time, like, it was just a massive investment and a huge risk. But at the end of the day, I just believe in the power of intentionally surrounding yourself with people that are operating on a higher level than you're operating on. And I believe in, I believe if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so I try to actively put myself into rooms where I'm not the smartest person in the room. And that's definitely one of them, the 100 million
Yeah.
group. Like one of those rooms where it's like, man, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole here. I'm one of the youngest here. I'm one of the poorest here. But in my regular friend circles, I do pretty well. You know what I mean? So when you actively put yourself in a room where the conversation is talking about how many millions they made last year, rather than like how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands that they made, it forces you to level up or get out. That's the biggest thing, is like you're either going to level up or you're going to realize that you don't want any of that, and you're gonna cower back. And not to say that in a negative way, that might just be a big huge self-awareness piece that you got from it. Like, you know what, I actually don't want all this stuff. I don't need to make that kind of money. I don't want to do these types of things. Okay, great. Now you realize that, back off and do your thing, and play it small, because that's what you want to do. That's the self-awareness that you got from it. But if you really want to attack life on the level that you're saying you want to attack life on, then how do you expect, you just going to expect to figure it out on your own? Like, I mean, I guess you can do that, and there's a lot of people who have, but man, why not try to go get around people who've figured it out, and people who can help guide you along the way, put deals together for you. To me, masterminds and connecting on that high of a level, especially for like those higher investments where the people in the room, like you can fake a $10,000 mastermind, right? Like you can put it on a credit card or something. When you're paying that much for a mastermind, you can't really fake that. You have to at least have some base level of financial success or knowledge to be able to be in the room. And so when you get in those types of rooms, it forces you to level up. You gotta level up, or you gotta get out. And so I was just a big proponent of, if I can shorten the runway to success, then that's what I'm going to do. And masterminds, uh, that to me is what masterminds do, is they help you shorten the runway a little bit. And if you've been around this space at all for any length of time, then you know that the most important, the most valuable asset that we have in life is not money, it's time. Right? Time is our only non-renewable asset. We can, if you lose $100 million this year, you can make it back in another 5 years, 10 years. You know what I mean? And people they do it all the time. One of my mentors, one of the guys in the 100 million group, Dave Meltzer, he's got a big story about how he went from $100 million back to zero, and then how he built it back up again in the last like 12, 15 years. That kind of stuff happens, but you can't get time back. And to me, that's the biggest deal, is like, you only get one shot at life, and I want to use my time doing the things that I love with the people that I love. And so if that's really how I want to use my time, then I owe it to myself and to my family to try to figure out how to reach that successful point earlier, so that I can have the time to do what I want with, if that makes sense. And so to me, it's worth sacrificing 100K to try to figure out if this is going to help me shorten 4, 5, 6, 7 years off of my learning curve. Or maybe I could have figured it out on my own, but I don't have to. If I'm willing to drop 100K, I can go learn from all these other people who've already been there, done that, shave 1, 3, 5, 10 years off of my learning curve and get it done a lot faster. To me, it's just paying for that shortened runway.
And to be able to get in a room and talk and have like very transparent conversations with people you would have never had access to before. I mean, I think that seems like the biggest thing. Like, how would you ever be able to have a conversation with Joel Marion or David Meltzer, or some of these other people who are super successful, give you like literally how they're doing it and things, how they overcame certain issues. It just seems like that's invaluable. So if you can swing it, it makes sense. But yeah, there's nothing like getting in a room full of successful people to make you realize that you're not as successful as you thought, and that either pushes you down further or it drives you to do better.
Right. Yep. Yeah. You'll figure out real quick where you land in the conversation when you're talking to some of those folks.
So a couple of questions. Are you, since you went to the real estate one, are you kind of doing anything in the real estate space, investing? Or are you kind of checking it out or poking in there?
Yeah. So we've always dabbled. My dad was a real estate agent from the time that I was like I don't know, probably 5 years old or something like that. So he's been in the real estate game for 20, 25 years. So it was always just kind of, when I was 7, 8 years old, I was going on caravans to open houses and spending my, you know, Saturday night at the office with my dad. And so I was always just around real estate, and they did a ton of, single family investments and flips and stuff like that. And so the last few years, we've probably done a total of 10, 12 deals in the last 5 years. So we always dabble, but we've never, just because I have so many other things going on now, I just don't have time to do it full time. But it is like I play so much in the real estate space. Like I was a guest on Bigger Pockets and a lot of other top real estate shows that are out there, because I still have a passion for real estate, and that's ultimately where I want to be. I want to have my own fund in the future in the real estate space. But yeah, I just don't have the time to do it all right now. But I'm always in and around real estate, learning about it, trying to stay connected in it, trying to source deals and learn more about it all the time.
Nice. That's awesome. Before I ask you the final question, where is the best place for people to learn, more about you, or if they're interested in starting a podcast, just maybe have a conversation?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to travischappell.com for just about anything. It's a little bit outdated, but we're in the middle of updating it right now. If you go there and you can't find much on me, then just shoot me an email, travis@travischappell.com. Makes it really easy. And then if you have podcasting questions specifically, like about coaching and stuff, probably best to just email me. But we also have a free training called Podcast Profit Secrets. We go into the 3 secrets of building a profitable podcast, which you can find and register for free. Take the training, it's all free at podcastprofitcourse.com.
Awesome. So my last question I always ask every guest is, what's your definition of generational wealth?
Generational wealth, my definition would be uh, really wrapped into what I can pass down to the younger generation from a knowledge standpoint more than just a money standpoint. Um, that to me is true generational wealth, because a lot of people build a lot of wealth, and then 1 or 2 generations they thought would be generational wealth, it's all gone because those kids were just entitled brats and weren't ever taught any principles of money and weren't forced to go through the shit to get to the money. And so that to me is really more what generational wealth is all about, is being the person to make a legacy for your family, to start that tradition and then keep the tradition going through furthering education and knowledge and hard work and a good work ethic and generating good skills and relationships, communication, and doing all of that through multiple generations. I think that's the more difficult part than creating a trust fund. A lot of people have done that and just wasted the opportunity to make sure that their kids keep it up. Probably because they're spent so much of their adult life building the trust fund to begin with, they didn't spend enough time doing that with their kids, and then their kids get the money and use it for whatever they want to use it for. So to me, generational wealth is really more about passing on the knowledge of how to continue to build that wealth rather than just passing over a trust fund and a checkbook.
I couldn't agree more. I totally agree. And I feel like hopefully our generation is getting smarter to this, because we've seen so much of it happen, that we're all learning that financial education and investing is so critical to teach your kids from the age that they're able to comprehend that at all. I think all of us are trying to figure out how to make a lot of money and not raise a bunch of spoiled brats. That's the tough thing. That's the tough thing to accomplish.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Travis, it's been fun. Thanks for coming on. I mean, we definitely got some nuggets out of this.
For
So
sure.
I'm excited that we had you come on and we had this, hour together and get a little bit more connected. And I really appreciate your time and all the wisdom we learned today. So I'm excited to kind of implement some things or check your software out for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. We get sold on people's products all the time. Like on the podcast, it's not even you trying to sell me anything. I'm just like, hey, we need to check this out afterwards. So I'm super inspired by your story too, like just starting literally from nothing. And I think it's awesome what you built. And we're glad to have met you and excited to check out your software too, because we will definitely be doing that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, guys. Kenny, Crystal, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for the awesome questions, for doing some prep work on this. It was a lot of fun to have the conversation. And yeah, obviously unintentional, but yeah, if you got if you want a really good guest list, you got a little bit of cash to spend on a good guest list, then Guestio is the place to do it. So
Awesome.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Travis.
Thanks,
all
Travis.
right, appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks. That was fun.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I got another interview coming up in like 7 minutes, so I'm gonna try to scarf down some food real quick and get off to that one. So
Here. Okay,
Awesome.
cool.
We'll be in touch, brother. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
yeah,
Travis.
definitely, bro. If I don't see you before then I'll definitely see you in Dallas at least.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
All right, Crystal, great to meet you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.